love this coffee shop. Here's why. I came in, I normally get a medium blend coffee. They were out of medium blend coffee, but they made a whole new pot just for me. They made me a pot of coffee. Love it. If you're in York, go to Captain Redbeard's. I don't want to go do FCA. I just recorded this whole thing and it wasn't ever recording. Okay, so here's what happened. The other day, let me back up. Second and fourth Wednesday of every month, I go over to the middle school here in York and I lead the FCA huddle. So that's something that's planned. It's something that happens every month. Not a big deal, right? Well, Wednesday came around. I didn't want to go. Like I had a lot of other stuff going on. I had other things I felt like doing. I didn't particularly feel like going over to the middle school and hanging out there for an hour and a half. Just wasn't really into it. What do you do when you have something that you've committed to that you don't feel like doing? Not only that, like back up for a second, like think about this with me. So I have been invited to go into the middle school 2 times a month to share Jesus, to talk about Jesus. Like that's the point of FCA, with kids that may or may not know Jesus or have families where their parents are Christians. And I didn't feel like going. Like that probably says something about me. We can all relate to it. This is just something that happened in my life that I had to deal with. But we've all got things like that. We've all got things where we come up and it's a good thing. Maybe it's even something we're supposed to do or something we're commanded to do or something that's just really good for us. We don't feel like doing it for whatever reason. There's stuff coming on. There's things going on in our lives. We're just not into it. Like, what do you do with that? So what did I do? I went anyway. Went over to the high school or the middle school, did FCA. Everything was great. It ended up being really, really good. And here's where I learned a lesson. And I keep on learning this lesson over and over and over again. You'd think I'd just pick up on it, but I don't. I still got to keep learning it. There's always a reason to do it. I just forgot about the reason. I forgot about the reason. Like I forgot why I decided to do this in the first place. Why I had agreed to go and lead FCA huddles. I had forgotten what it was that had caused me to say yes in the first place. And I had this epiphany. I realized something. A lot of the reason that we struggle in a lot of different areas is because we forget the reason. Like in Revelation, the church at Ephesus had lost its first love. They were just like on autopilot. They did all the right stuff, but they didn't do it for the right reasons. They didn't do it for the right motive. There wasn't the right affection there. And man, it's like this in so many different areas of our lives, like our marriage, our family, our parenting, our job, going to church. Why is it that people don't go to church? Well, maybe it's because they've forgotten the reason. Maybe it's because they're letting a temporary desire to not go to church override a better good for them. What is it that causes people to not share the gospel? Maybe they forgot the reason. A lot of things in our lives come down to this. Like we just forgot the reason. So let me give you a few suggestions that I've learned from this situation and from a couple others in my life that might be helpful to you. Number one, ask yourself this: am I loving God? Am I loving God? If I am loving God, then I am going to sacrifice myself for others like he did. A lot of times when we forget the reason or when we don't want to do something, even if we know it's the right thing to do, it comes down to the fact that we're just not loving God like we should. So how do I do that? How do I love God more? Well, I open up his word and I learn more about him. I talk to others about him. I ask for others to pray for me. I have others encourage me. I see his faithfulness over and over and over again in the past. I focus on how to live my life in a way that brings him the most glory. Because the funny thing is, when we bring God glory, when we live our lives to bring him glory in all of these different aspects, whether it's FCA or our marriage or our parenting or going to church or participating in family events, whatever it is, if we're living our lives to glorify God, we're going to receive joy from that because we're going to get more of God. So number one is, am I loving God in this decision? In this case, I was really more focused on myself than I was on God. And I really wasn't demonstrating love for God in the way that I was thinking through this. I'd forgotten the reason I agreed to do it in the first place. And that reason was because I love God and want to have others hear about him. Number 2, am I loving other people? This one's kind of like abstract because it might have been that I was loving God and loving other people by not going to FCA, like if something happened and I was needed somewhere else. But in this case, it wasn't that at all. It was the fact that I was caring more about myself and my comfort and what I wanted to do than I was about the kids. So I had to remember another reason why I did it in the first place, which was because I care about these kids and I want them to hear about Jesus. I want them to come to faith. I want them to hear the gospel. I want them to hear good news. I want them to have somebody in their life that's going to encourage them. I want them to have somebody in their life that's going to be a positive influence and a positive role model. I want to have an opportunity to make that 30-minute lunch period a little bit better for them. Loving other people. So when I come into a conflict with these types of decisions, I have to ask myself, am I loving other people? Number 3, I need to pray that God would give me a greater love for him, a greater love for others, and the faith to step and go and do what it was I need to do. It was a weird sentence. In this case, I needed to ask for strength to get out of the door, get in the car, drive over to the school, and walk in there with the right attitude, with the right heart. Like, our affections drive our actions. My affections were wrong. My affections needed to be changed. My motive was wrong. My motive needed to be changed. I can't change those things. I need him to change them. I need him to give me a greater love for him and a greater love for others. And then my responsibility is to act on that, which brings me to number 4, take a step of faith. Like, believe it or not, it was actually a step of faith to go do FCA because I didn't really want to. I wasn't feeling it, right? But here's where that faith comes in, because I've seen over and over and over again that as I live in a way that brings honor and glory to God, as I step out in faith, in obedience, trusting that God's way is better than my way, I have received joy over and over and over again. Us living for the glory of God always results in our joy. It might be difficult, but it results in joy. So I walked in the door, and it was like, as soon as I walked in the door, there was nowhere else I'd rather be. All of those things fell away. So often, it's because we aren't stepping out in faith that we aren't experiencing the joy of obedience. Like, when we see who God is, and we see what he's done for us, and we are loving God and we're loving other people, that causes us to do something. It causes us to step out in faith. Now, in between loving God and loving others and stepping out in faith, we have to ask for his help to be able to do that. But when we step out in faith, it's amazing how much joy that brings. This can be applied to all sorts of different things. I'm really struggling with parenting. I need to focus on the fact of why I'm doing it. I forgot the reason why I was being a faithful parent. Number 1, loving God. Number 2, loving my kids. Number 3, I need to pray for strength and faith to be able to do those things. Number 4, I'm going to take a step of faith and trust and do it, even if I don't feel like it, because I'm trusting that God's way is better than mine and greater joy comes from obeying him. This would be transformational for your marriages. If we just sort of like applied this, like, so many marriages fall apart because people forgot the reason they married their spouse in the first place. They're not loving God. They're not loving their spouse. They're not living in the strength that God supplies. And they're not taking steps of faith, trusting that God's way is better and his way brings joy. Same thing with sharing the gospel. Like, why don't we share the gospel? Because we're afraid. We're not loving God like we should. We're not loving others like we should. We're not doing it in dependence upon him. And we're not actually taking those steps of faith. This is what not wanting to do FCA taught me. It taught me that there are all kinds of things in my life, all kinds of things that I don't want to do, but that I know are right, that I know are good, that I know are the things that God actually wants me to do. And the struggle is I don't feel like it. Maybe I've forgotten the reason why. Maybe there are other things that are clamoring for my attention. Maybe there are 100 other good things that I could be doing. And the bridge between what God wants me to do and me actually doing it is loving God, loving my neighbor, praying for strength, and then stepping out in faith, trusting that he will meet all of my needs. Hope this was helpful to you. If it was, you can subscribe down here. You can hit like down here. And let me know what you think in the comments. I will see you next time.